Let's go ahead and create a conditional access policy. So we are in Entra, and inside of Entra ID, we're down at conditional access. And that takes us to the conditional access overview. So here there's a lot of information on the left about managing your conditional access policies, but we're going to create a new one. So right up here at the top, there's create new policy. So we click on that and it opens up the create new policy template. So inside here, we create a name, and this name needs to be a name that follows a configuration that is standard within our organization. So I'm just going to say uh, config, just so we know it needs to be related. So assignments. Who is this conditional access policy addressing? So when we click on that, it allows us to make a description. So users and groups, and we're going to include nobody, all users, or select users, right? So in all users, it shows up an alert, don't lock yourself out, right? Because all users actually includes the person creating this policy. So a lot of times you want to include a break glass in here. So you might do a select users or all users and then exclude who it doesn't apply to, right? We're going to exclude, you know, a guest or external users, directory users, or users and groups. Click on that, and it's going to say who, right? So we get to go through and say who we want to exclude. So it'd be me, right? But I'm going to go back and I'm just going to say none right now because you can also select users and groups. And when you do it, you say directory roles because maybe you want this to apply to roles within your organization or just guest or external users, right? But when you click on the users and groups, again, that pop out comes out and you can select who, whether it's a user or a group, and they'll show up selected off to the right. Again, I'm going to uncheck and say none. Target resources. So what is this conditional access going to apply to? So we click the drop down. Is it going to apply to actions, authentication contexts, or resources? So most of the time, it attacks resources, right? And so we're going to include none, say it's not going to do anything, all resources, all cloud apps, anything 365 related, or select resources. And inside here, we can select. You can either use your filter, which filters out and gives you a script you can use, or select allows you to choose from the available cloud resources because maybe you only want it to apply to Outlook or to things of that sort. So you can select what you want so you can get that granular. Or a lot of times you just say all resources. So if it's 365, we want to make sure this conditional access policy applies to everybody. And again, we can exclude select resources. So we said all resources, but we're going to exclude, we don't want it to apply to whatever resource here. So that's what that includes. So let's go back and say none. And then if we look, we can also say user actions. So register the security information, register and join devices. So you can actually say when somebody registers or joins a device, they have to use multi-factor authentication. So things of that sort. Let's go back up to user actions, authentication context, right? So there's no contexts that are configured. Resources none because I didn't apply anything. So over here it says no target resources have been selected. So this doesn't apply to anything. So right now we're creating one that has no users attached to it and doesn't apply to anything. So here's a new one is network. So we can have it go to any network or location this applies to, or all trusted networks, or selected networks. And again, then we can see what our trusted networks are over here. You have IP ranges where you have a trusted MFA IP range you can put in there, or you can even do it by countries. So that's one of those that was off on the side was trusted locations, and they would show up in here. So you can set up your trusted locations, and then they'll show up here, and you can act on that. A good one a lot of times is I'm going to go through and for everybody, I'm going to target all cloud actions. And hey, nobody can log in outside the USA, right? So that's why USA is in there. And that way it helps to avoid a lot of the network breaches. Not always, it's just one extra layer of security. All right, so I'm going to say not to configure. So again, no network configurations. So conditions, let's click on that. Now, here's where it gets fun, right? So we can actually configure it to require user risk. So as a user risk level meets something, we're going to configure it. So if the user risk is at a medium or high level, it's going to require it, conditional access. And yep, we want to get rid of that. So good. Over here is sign-in risk. So that's user risk. That's based on the Microsoft analysis of the user. Here's the sign-in risk. So this one looks at, hey, what is their sign-in risk? Are they trying to sign in from an unsecure location? All of those things. So you can figure that. You can say what you have to do on there, right? So, yep, we're not saving that. Insider risk, same thing. Look at their risky data related activities. Are they seeing a lot of things? Purview has that formulation. So is it seeing a lot of files being transferred? Again, high risk. We're going to make them, MFA in just to make sure it's not something else going on. Device platforms. So are there specific platforms that we want it to apply to? Android, iOS, Windows, right? So those are some options you have there. Locations, right? So again, this is the same as network. It's just they put it in its own separate location. So you see that. Client apps. So again, does this apply to browser, mobile apps? So you want to make sure if somebody's on their phone, they have to, MFA in. That's where you can set that. Filter for devices. So maybe you have a specific device in your organization that you want to, or a group of devices. You can actually filter for it and apply it to that one specifically. You have a specific computer that needs to be isolated out. And authentication flows. So inside here, you can configure that, and you see that it's a device code flow or an authentication transfer. This one's not used a whole lot, but it's there. All right. So here we go down here to access controls. So what are we going to do? So in granting, are we going to allow access? And if so if they meet these requirements up here that we've talked about, we're going to grant access. But are we going to require multi-factor authentication? Authentication strengths? And then you get to choose the different types of strengths. And these are standards, but you can also make your own strength levels as far as multiple levels, multi-factor authentication, not just using your phone. Maybe it's a text and maybe it's other things as well. Require the device to be marked compliant. So in Intune, do you set up a compliance policy to make sure that that device has met all of your compliance activations? Require Microsoft Entra hybrid joined device to make sure that it's joined to your organization. Require app protection policy. Again, those are set up. And require a password change. So maybe you want to make sure if it's a compromised device, somebody's trying to log in, require a password change from that. Boom, there you go. See? And then it adds more. You can have multiple of these selected at the same time. Require all of the access controls or require one of the selected controls, right? So you can choose if there's multiple out there. You also have the ability to block access, right? So you can make sure that you go through and say block everything that is available. So in here, target resources, all users, I want to block access, but I maybe am excluding a location of the United States. So I just blocked access for everybody to everything unless their location is excluded of the United States. That's how you can keep people from outside the United States accessing any of your resources. So that is the grant. No control selected, so I got out of there. And session is also another one down here. So inside session, you can use conditional access by app control, sign in frequency, persistent browser session to make it, relog in, things of that sort. So once you get that all done, now you come down here to your policy enablement. So a good practice is to report only at first, and then look at your logs to find out what is being impacted from your policy to determine, are you targeting it correctly? Because if you go live right away and there's an error in there, you could shut down the whole organization, especially if you didn't put your break glass in here for the users and didn't have something that allowed you to get in if you blocked access to everything. Again, blocking access to everybody, if they're outside the United States, make sure you have your break glass in there. Something that's never used, only secure, that you can get back in there and fix this. Turn it off if you need to. So turning it on makes it live. So then it's impacting whatever this says. And you can turn it off as well. So turning it off just allows it to be there. And then you can always apply it later on. Report only is nice. It's the same as off, except it's reporting it so you can find out what things are happening. All right. And whenever you're done, you hit create and it adds it to your list inside of your policies. And those will be over here where you can come over and see policies. So once you hit OK, it's going to show that in here. Microsoft has a list of policies that are already set up for you, but then you have others that you created. And you can see if they're on or report only, when they were created, things of that sort. So you have the ability to examine them, find out. That's why it's good to have a nice policy name that tells what it is, as opposed to test, right? We don't know what that even applies to. Whereas up here, block device code flow. That's very descriptive. I can see this without having to click in. I know what it is. So you can see the policies up here, user created policies, 3 of them. And we can always click on it and edit. All right, so that's creating a conditional access policy.